Hey, Betty.
Yeah. How's it going?
Pretty good, man.
We got new jingles. We've got,
Oh yeah, it's exciting.
well, yeah, welcome to another episode of the Refound Show where Graham and Ryan just shoot the shit. And hey, I was looking at our stats. We were actually getting more listeners. We had 34 streams.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So I feel like that's progress.
Yeah, man. Honestly, I just like hanging out and having fun conversations with you. So yeah, I think that's yeah, I'm fine if
Yeah. But it was just like,
but
wow,
that's cool.
we're not entirely in a vacuum. At least our, I don't know. My mom's probably listening.
Oh,
Hi,
that's cool.
mom.
Hi, Ryan's mom. I don't think I've met you yet.
I
Uh,
actually don't know if she is listening to this one.
oh,
How,
that's
how
funny.
can we unpack all of our therapy shit and talk about our parents if our parents are listening?
I know, man. It's kind of it's a catch 22 on that one.
Man. Well, let me give you a few headlines and you can pick which one is most interesting. This is what I'm kind of coming in with. My grandfather died on Monday.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Wow, springing that on me here. Wow, I didn't know that. I'm so sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of how these things go, right? Like that surprise. I worked a full day on Monday, and then my mom
Yeah.
called me and like broke the news, and so that same kind of just impact of like, whoa,
Fuck, man.
the world is different. So yeah, that was kind of a big thing for me this week. I took Tuesday off and kind of led myself on a medicine journey. I ate some mushrooms, laid on the couch for like 4 or 5 hours, and just had like a real
Yeah.
like yeah, what medicine that was though, like from kind of the constipated feeling I had of just like, oh, like I'm kind of crying in these intermittent fits but then like holding it back,
Yeah.
to like I took those mushrooms and I just like cried for like whales, like full
Yeah.
body, moving so much energy, and after that I felt completely different and like integrated, like news then
Yeah.
becomes not this detached thing, but actually this lived experience. So yeah, I mean that was kind of the big part of my last week.
Wow, man.
Because it was on my dad's side.
Yeah.
It's like last time we were out in Maine and saw him, we had four generations like all lined up, the four of us male
Hmm.
um, in the lineage, and yeah, and like now we're down a link, and it kind of like promotes everybody. My dad is now the eldest, and now I'm like second eldest, and then
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know.
My heart's with you, man. I love you, man. I hope that you let me know if you need anything at all
Oh yeah.
outside of this. But man, I'm happy that you were able to move that. I know exactly what you mean on that feeling of that just kind of like wailing sadness when you actually let your body go into that. Since I never did that as a kid, even with all this really painful stuff and death and all this horrible stuff, and I think I probably cried, I don't know, 3 or 4 times like my entire teenage and there's just so much pain in there, and it took until and psychedelics were incredibly helpful for me too. That was when I was in my early 20s, that was the only way that I was able to cry. Like that was the only way that I was able to access those, to where my body could even feel safe enough to do that. And once you start kind of finding ways to access that like pressure valve like that, it's incredible how much pain is stuck in there. And not even just from, things that you're conscious of, but just this buildup of layers of whether it's self-rejection or fear, or even just like we've talked about before, like even literally just the somatic trauma that a child experiences being born. It's incredible that all that stuff is packed in there. And again, if someone doesn't have a way to access that and help it to release, it just builds up over years and years and years and just influences everything that you do. I was really curious as you were talking about that. Did you find that giant layer that came loose? Sometimes it's interesting for me to feel when a giant layer like that will come loose, what else it's connected to. You almost feel this like massive psychological structure underneath where it's like the spider web and everything's connected to everything else, but some bonds are stronger than others. Did you find that like as that was coming loose, you were getting either images or pictures or um, feeling connections to any other big parts of your psyche that wouldn't have been obvious?
Oh yeah, because I feel like the actual event of my grandfather passing was a trigger, but once I actually got into that stream of feeling, it was connected to the basal understanding that everything is lost, right? Like when
Yeah.
someone dies, you kind of get that reality. And so that was the gateway, the gateway tears. But then a lot of the howls and things were connected to my kids and them growing up and my own father and even his relationship with his dad. Because I don't know the last time he cried. I've seen him kind of tear up, like maybe once or twice
Hmm.
my whole life. So yeah, that kind of frozen ball of energy, that one strand I kind of pulled to open the thing up, then led everywhere. And at a certain point, as often happens, I felt like it kind of collapsed back on me, feeling profoundly sorry to all these people that I loved. I think at one point I was actually like wailing and crying, like, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. And I was relaying that to Kayla after the fact, and she's like, what are you sorry about? I'm like, I don't know that I like exist at all, and I have this impact on people, and I'm such a shit. And like, I know that I hurt people in different ways. And yeah, because like my relationship with my son can get, and I'm looking at a picture of him right as I looked up that way. It's funny. Uh, we can be like combative, and there's these like generational patterns that repeat, and it's just like that three-dimensional view into that giant knot. And my grandfather is this like, you know, um, I don't know, he's from a different generation, and some of the work that I've been doing is directly related to like untying the trauma from his lifetime and his father, and just seeing how those things like ripple down through the generations almost unavoidably.
That that's really interesting. The I'm sorry being a thing that gets repeated. I found that too when I kind of just let that hurt person inside. Because it takes me so much work. I mean, I have a couple different protocols and whatnot that I've kind of used over the years, but it takes me so much work to be able to access and get to that stuck, energy that's kind of so deep in there, that's so kind of protected in the psyche. And it takes so much work. I have to like physically wear myself out. I have to like keep fascia stuff. I have to do all this kind of stuff because it's physically stuck in your body, right? And but whenever I finally get it, it's like this, it's like this gold mine. It's like, finally, I've finally accessed this thing. So I just try to give it as much space as I can and just kind of let it express until that emotion's like completely moved through. But that's one of the things that I've found that person inside saying too, is like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And it just, I feel like goes back to this just really interesting. There's like a bunch of really interesting discussions just on this kind of core shame that I think most people in general, I feel like it's even more pronounced in men for numerous reasons, but that kind of core shame for, I guess, existing or not knowing how to do things perfectly, or the idea that there's a right and wrong way to do something, all of this stuff. And the more I have conversations with and do just kind of like deeper work with people, and specifically men doing like more deeper emotional work, the more that just kind of core shame, honestly, it seems to be one of, if not the like deepest core wounds kind of blocking and constraining people. I think about, there's a guy on Instagram that I follow that I'm a big fan of. I think his name is Malcolm Frazier or something like that. He's a men's coach, and he talks about the three-headed dragon, and it's like great framing. And basically the one head is basically the mother wound, which is like an energetic attachment from the child to their mother. And it's not a thought thing. It's not just like it's an energetic enmeshment thing that at some point has to come loose. And then the second is the kind of lack of initiation on the father side, so kind of the father wound, and the fact that at least in the West, most of us just kind of you have to self-initiate yourself into manhood and doing what it means to actually be a conscious man, which is turns out really fucking difficult to do. That's why most people are not. And then the core, and then kind of the middle head, which is kind of the core one, is what he calls kind of that core shame, and that core shame of existing. And that's the most difficult one. And anyway, I just think that's really, really interesting. And a lot of times I will wonder where that comes from. And if you had zero social conditioning in our world, would you still have that? Or is it something that's kind of an inborn just element of existing as a human? So I don't know. I'm
Man.
curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, gosh, I like that. All three of those are, yeah, big and beastly. And having done a number of men's groups and work with different men, it wasn't until later in my life that I had the privilege of doing that. And it was kind of from one of those like crisis moments of like, oh, I
Yeah.
need help. And
Yeah.
I was fortunate to find a couple different groups where that could be worked through. And man, it was to your point here, so interesting to be in these circles and have these men that were like, in some cases, just like big and built and bearded and like so much masculine energy. And then you get around those three,
Hmm.
core
Yep.
wounds, and it just like all of that is like a front, it collapses around
Hmm.
this really childlike, sad, insecure, um, and even it's in some cases like more feminine or more like omega energy.
Hmm.
And it's like, oh my gosh, like this whole like, rigid masculine front is almost a shell to like protect that deepest,
Hmm.
most tender mommy issues or yeah, I think the lack of initiation really shows up as a uncertainty into what our purpose is or what our
Hmm.
point is, and it can turn into these selfish pursuits or images of success, etc., but without that tying into the tapestry of culture. And actually, little sidetrack, but this was really powerful for me. It was actually what you said on our last episode, talking about the masculine, feminine, and actually the masculine as like being the space,
Yeah. Yeah.
or like holding that space. It's
Shiva. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, the thing that's crazy to me is I've always had that concept flipped, and I've read
Really.
tons of Eastern philosophy, etc. And I've always thought of the female as being the space, being the Maya or Kali or
Hmm.
Shiva being more like the dancer in the field of time. But flipping that concept around, it was a big part of my experience on Tuesday when I was kind of mourning my grandfather, because I saw how for all of his interesting, character dynamics, he held space really powerfully. And
Hmm.
that's like my experience of him is he was a New Englander, like up in Maine, and just this, stubborn but very capable, resourceful, and just like physically large. He's probably like 6'3" or 6'4", just like a huge dude. Um, and he just like held space, and all of us were able to like have our experience and kind of orbit around this, paternal being. And it really, it really flipped in my mind like what that can mean, and what I wanted to kind of move forward as a continuation of him and his energy in my own life was that ability to just like give the people around me the calmness in their own breathing, because I'm there and I can hold the
Hmm.
space and I can take care of things. Bizarrely enough, like after that whole day of like doing this mushroom journey, at the end of it, I decided to go down into my crawl space under my house and clean it out. There was a bucket down there. I went down there to do a repair like 8 months ago, and there was a leak, and so I just put a bucket under there. But then I closed the whole thing up and just left it. And like in the back of my mind, it's been down there, but I don't want to do that. It's such a pain in the ass. I have to move the refrigerator. I have to go down in a hole. It's like full of black
Hmm.
widows and rat poop, mouse poop. But I was like, that bucket was like such a metaphor for this part of me that like doesn't want to do the real dirty work,
Yeah.
like our refrigerator that sits over that hole, holds all the food, and it's covered with pictures. Every year we plaster it with pictures from the previous year of all of our best moments. So here's this like totem of our beautiful life literally sitting over a hole where there's a leaky bucket that was completely overfilled. There was water everywhere and like mouse poop everywhere. And I felt like what an energetic presence at the core of our house that's like unexamined and uncleaned because I'm not willing to do that. So even in the midst of kind of, coming down from this journey, I spent the next like couple hours with like a full respirator, like cleaning and vacuuming mouse poop and bailing out water. But like that's what my grandfather would have done,
Yeah.
Like that's my role. And long story, but I did want to touch on that because yeah, I think the kind of the plight of the masculine or male or even male identifying person in today's culture is that there is this disconnection from what our service is.
Hmm.
And you asked the question about that core shame. Would it exist in a different setting or a different culture, or is it somehow created by this environment? And I want to touch on that next because I've got some ideas about that, but I'll kick it back over to you.
I really liked that the metaphor and the bucket in there. It's so funny just because I man, there's like a couple different threads that sparked for me. One, I always think it's interesting. I found like a bunch of these patterns that recur in my life, including even yesterday, where I was having a couple conversations with a couple friends of mine that are kind of going through some big things in their life, and we were just I was just kind of sharing some things that had helped me, and of course I'm feeling great because I'm in this position of sharing some things that have helped me. It's energizing to me to do that kind of thing. This is helpful to them, and I get off the call just feeling great. The person inside feels great. He feels like he's really got life figured out, right? Because look at how great he's doing. Look at all these ways that he can help in these different ways. And then I have some stuff come up in my personal life after that that just it's just something like connected to like just some of the deepest pain I've ever felt, and it's connected to elements of shame of not being enough, or all of these different kinds of kind of self-rejection wounds and stuff like that. And it's just kind of like amazing, and it's like that, it's the bucket, right? It's the bucket of like, I don't want to go in there, I don't want to deal with that, because I not that I don't want to deal with that, I don't know how to deal with that. I may know how to deal with these layers, but these four deeper layers that I keep kind of stumbling into, I don't know how to deal with those, and that's why they're still there. If I knew how to deal with them, I would have dealt with them already. And just the levels of intensity that can be in there, that can be so easily masked by things going well, or by the person inside being happy, or by thinking that they've got things figured out, or whatever it is. And all it takes sometimes is one little stimulus, usually on one of those three heads, right? Something connected to one of those three heads, one little stimulus, and that pendulum can just swing so far so fast the other way. And you go from literally just having this absolutely wonderful ecstatic day to literally those feelings for me will sometimes go to, or at least in this past year, moments of like, I don't care if I live or die. Like I feel like I've worked through any I feel like I crossed a huge bridge around anything approaching suicidal ideation or something like that when I was a little kid. I just kind of I, without going into that as a topic, that hasn't been a struggle for me for the rest of my life, even in really difficult times. I have friends that do struggle with that. But there will be kind of like this apathetic element sometimes of just like, take me, Lord. I don't even, I don't care. I don't care. And we talked about that before. And then a few things can kind of go right from that standpoint. And now all of a sudden we're back in this just ecstatic, wonderful element. And just the sensations of that alone are intense, but I find by far the hardest thing about those kind of big pendulum swings for me is like the stories, is the mind trying to label something or understand something and then extrapolate from there. And it will make what would be a unpleasant but tolerable moment feel like a crushing moment because it's extrapolating this moment out for the next, for the rest of your life or something like that. And I think that's why, like, whenever I can get to access those really deep places to, cry, wail, whatever that is, whenever there's some really deep grief that needs to move through, it's gotten so much easier for me to process because I know that it's not going to last forever. Like I can just kind of hold this space, and I know I'm just going to be with it until it peters out, and I know that it's going to. For me, every time that I know that that energy's moved through is because I start laughing, because it turns from crying into laughing. I'm like, okay,
Totally.
great, aha, great, things are done, like great, on to the next thing. And but it's funny sometimes. I don't know if you'll struggle with that too, of whenever that pendulum will swing back sometimes, those um that person inside will extrapolate that, and it will make an unpleasant moment so much more unpleasant because the person side is holding on to that moment. I've tried to work through kind of like the logic of, okay, what does my mind actually do? What is the psyche actually doing here? And what in my experience, what it's doing is it's basically like afraid of getting hurt, or it's afraid of this thing happening. It's afraid of getting disappointed, getting hurt, getting rejected, whatever it is. So it's less painful in its logic to hold on to already being hurt, or this story of it already happening. And just, it's like people when you get in these like self-defeating mindsets, or people that are so worried they're going to get rejected, they reject the other person ahead of time, or they create a situation where they get rejected. And it's just, it's really fascinating because it doesn't really make any logical sense, but yet to the psyche, that seems to be a
Huh.
safer course of action for it, maybe because it's predictable. But I'm curious if you found elements of that kind of playing out here, or if it's been easier to kind of come in and out of those deeper places, or if there's, I don't know, kind of a stickiness to them.
Wow, yeah, man. This is why I love talking to you, man. Like I feel like this is such a fun ping pong match to have because every time the ball bounces on the other side of the table, I'm just like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Like I have all kinds of ways that relates. And specifically what I was thinking about, in this particular situation, I think I don't know, some of that, the wailing and just like the release, it felt like a clearing of this organ, like
Yeah.
almost literally, but like a
Yep.
pipe organ. It's like normally when I feel that kind of pressure, that buildup or sadness or all these feelings that you're talking about, like, yeah, it's so much more comfortable to collapse down into these lower energies that are more about like shame or yeah, self-flagellation or whatever. Like at least those energies are like something I can hold on to. Whereas
Mhm.
like get into this like kind of heart space, it all just wants to like come up into my head, and I just feel like this pressure that like is so uncomfortable that in normal situations, like it's physically more uncomfortable to be sad and cry than it is to just hold this charge of um, grouchiness or
Mhm.
et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, on Tuesday, I think it was a loosening of that grip to allow that messiness to come out. The what would normally feel embarrassing or too much. Like I was even aware I was at the couch that was like at the front half of my house, and I have neighbors that are leaving for work, and it's like, oh my gosh, I am wailing so loud. I'm sure people can hear this from down the street. But you know what? In that moment, I didn't care, so I let all that energy flow.
Mhm.
Um, so that's kind of like in relation to this most recent kind of purging, and just like once that channel was open, then it was easier to kind of titrate these other feelings that were also stuck, out that same channel. And it was like turning over compost.
Mhm.
The pitchfork went in, like actually losing someone that I care about. But once that thing was open, like all these gases were escaping from all over.
Yeah.
Um, but the other thing that I was kind of relating when you were talking is this. I guess it actually connects to something that's more recent. So I kicked my cat this morning, and like my cat he's like 2 years old. He's this like big male kitten. He's cute as hell, but annoying as hell. And he was attacking my daughter because he wants to go outside, and we don't let him go outside because he's a murderer and like just kills all these songbirds. But part of the reason why I was late to film this morning was because he was waking us up at like 4 a.m, wanting to be fed, like all this stuff. And so I had this moment, especially when he was attacking my daughter, of just like, puffed up monkey rage. And I like chased him halfway down the hallway and just like kicked him like right in the butt. And I mean, it is funny. And it's those types of things to your point where, most of the time I feel like, oh, enlightened
I'm
being.
not
And I've,
condoning you kicking your cat, by the way. I'm not condoning it.
but like, those moments that happen where it's like, holy shit, like it's such a tenuous grasp I have on this civility or,
Yeah.
an image of myself. And then like, oh yeah, that's who I really am. I'm someone who would like hurt an animal or, and that's just one example. I mean, I think animals are actually a really meaningful kind of proxy for like a type of relation that we have with ourselves and others. And when I was younger,
Yeah.
like, I adopted this stray dog and it was just a really rough go. And like some of the moments that I had with that animal where I was just pushed over the brink, like, it still haunts me in my psyche that, on my, uh, entrance into the pearly gates, they're going to be reviewing my life like, hey, you did a lot of cool stuff, but remember this moment with your dog when it ate your sunglasses? I'll be like, yep, to the elevator. Like, um, yeah, and I think it's kind of to your point, like you could be going, going, going great, and then something will happen that just like knocks you into this lower energy shell.
Mhm.
And yeah.
Well, I completely understand that sentiment. Like jokes aside, and I remember when I was in India years ago, learning about kind of the history of different rules against any kind of harm towards certain animals. I believe they were the first, or at least first in any kind of modern context, to have laws like that to protect animals. And part of it was because it was basically revealing who you were, how you treated something that was in a weaker position than you were, not just people, but animals. And I thought it was really, really, really telling, because it's really true of when you have, nothing to gain, or when you have the, absolute power over whatever this creature is. How do you act? How do you behave, especially when that animal's not doing what you want it to do? And I've had plenty of moments like that too. I'll share a shame moment. Our little dog who passed away a year and a half ago, who I loved that dog to death. Oh my God, what I would do. I spent so much money keeping that dog alive for the last everything she could possibly need to help with her health issues. But anyway, but I think back to, when um, I first met the little dog, when Allie and I first started dating, and she would, drive me crazy, and she would annoy me, and she would this, and she'd wake me up in the middle of the night snoring, this adorable little dog noise. But I had to get up at, 5 o'clock the next morning. I was tired. I needed to work. I needed to do this, and I get so annoyed at her in the middle of the night. I just, wake up, stop snoring, whatever. And I think back to those moments, and this was, years ago, because I stopped doing that after, you know, getting a glimpse of myself doing that. Of just like, oh God, what am I doing? This is an innocent little dog's just sleeping, having a little doggy dream. What am I doing? But I think back to that, even, 9 years ago, or whenever that was, and I will just kind of cringe sometimes of what, and it's just like that. But in a weird way, it also kind of, I feel like there's almost like an empathy view as well, because I think of me as somebody who also just loves animals and very much cares about just interacting with other beings, from a just conscious and loving place. I did that, right? Like, I was an asshole to that little dog. I was a dick to that little dog several different times when because all these reasons that my psyche had. And while I was doing this because I needed to get up and provide the next morning, and I was taking care of this, whatever justifications or whatever. And sometimes it will help me get more, I don't know, I'll have more empathy towards maybe somebody else who um, did something that was really hurtful or harmful to me, maybe when I was younger, or maybe is doing this to somebody else, or something like that. And rather than having just like that judgmental lens, like to the elevator, you know what I mean, of like the kind of human element, as you learn to kind of have more compassion for yourself, of basically, um, if I can be that unconscious towards a little animal, and then see that later and reflect and go, God, how did that even happen? How did I even do that? Can I not have that level of compassion towards somebody else doing that right now? You know what I mean? Because I'll have this part of me sometimes where, if I'll see somebody doing some kind of behavior that is really harmful towards himself or somebody else, which is a lot of people a lot of the time, And especially when you look at like the cumulative effects of certain behaviors. And sometimes it's really easy to judge that. I'm just like, oh, how can they not see this? How can they not see all the damage that they're doing at this, or the way that they're hurting their, they're gonna, their kid's gonna be in therapy for years because of this pattern that they're doing to, or whatever it is. Like I have, friends that have kids who I love, but I'm like, God, gotta stop doing this. And anyway, but basically having more um, understanding for a lot of these things, I think people really, really, really can't see. Like when we talk about something being unconscious, you literally can't see it until you see it. You literally can't. Psyche hides it from you. And it's just kind of, yeah, it's really fascinating to me because even those, and I'll even have moments like that. I feel like at every point in my life, I could look back on it. If I look back 6 months or even 3 months or whatever from any version of myself towards earlier things, I have elements of that where I'm like, I can't believe I, snapped at Allie like that. I can't believe that I was that short tempered. I can't believe that I was whatever it was. I feel like maybe there's an element of that where it's just that constant spiral where you're kind of constantly doing that. You're constantly looking back at um, because if maybe that's part of that growth spiral, you know what I mean, where you're constantly seeing the different ways that there's that kind of um unkindness, human elements, whatever it is, coming through, and just kind of constantly becoming more conscious or finding more better ways to express that. I'm rambling a little bit, but you get what
No,
I mean.
no, yeah, totally. And just kind of like picking up on that, I'm thinking again about your question about, is this just how we are in this culture? Is this how humans are in a vacuum, or whatever that might mean? And, particularly with this aggression, one of the things that strikes me, and I don't know, we're on kind of a male uh, bent, so I'm just gonna keep it there. But like as a young male, there is a lot of physicality, there is a lot of aggression, there are a lot of body systems that have been gifted by evolution to
Yep.
survive and to fight and to defend and to um, yeah, that don't get a healthy place to go in our culture. And I'm thinking about like a kindergarten classroom where
Hmm.
everyone is just, boys and girls alike are just told to like sit down and be nice. And inevitably, there's fights, or someone steals someone's toy, and there's like vigilante justice that happens over in that corner. And like there's this whole like sublimation, or like those same energies are coming out, but they're coming out in a trickle, and they're usually being punished by a higher authority, whether it's a teacher, or I mean, definitely in religious contexts, it's almost used as proof positive of our sinfulness or our unworthiness,
Yeah.
of our need
Hmm.
to be redeemed. So caught red-handed, maybe those same energies, out in a it'll be interesting, like your travels through Africa, if you're going to see more like tribal living. I know when I was in the rainforest a couple of years ago, like with that very, very primitive society, the people that were, I think it was 11 hours by boat into the rainforest. Like
Wow.
I saw all of these human elements, but they did seem to be more held in that environment. And it was refreshing and amazing to see, um, yeah, just like a glimpse into 10,000 years ago of
Hmm.
humans living, and like, oh wow, this all makes sense. These energies in our bodies are like allowing us to survive in these crazy environments full of predators and et cetera, et cetera. Um, I think the other part that, we haven't talked about yet, but I think is super, super big in this kind of ball of topics is just the sexual shame.
Hmm.
And as a young male that has all of these like feelings and energies, and then we're predominantly in this culture that both is putting sex everywhere. It's like the biggest
Hmm.
marketing and like sales tool, and it's this tool of emotional domination by Puritan modes of thinking.
Hmm.
And so two real quick tangents. One is we inherited a bunch of these old magazines because Kayla was doing like collaging with one of her classes, and our neighbors were like, "Oh, here, have these old magazines. Like, this is a Time magazine from like 1932. Like, what the heck?" But one of the ones that we got was this Life magazine. It was from 1986. It was their 50th anniversary, and they were going through things that they had published that caused a public outrage, and all of them
That
were
sounds
about,
amazing.
yeah, it was amazing. And pretty much all of them were about either scenes of like violence, like, soldiers that had been shot, or, real graphic kind of, people
Yeah.
in pain, and people, were so up in arms about, like, how could you show this to the American population? And someone said on that kind of violence, and the dead have truly died in vain if the living men won't look at them. Thought that
Hmm.
was interesting.
Wow.
But then everything else was just like any kind of sexual uh anything, or even just
Hmm.
like women's bodies, like there was a Time magazine cover or Life magazine cover from, I don't know, 1954, that was showing a marble sculpture of like the bust of a woman with, her breasts, and you should have read like the hate mail that the magazine got. So anyway, my point here, and like this little segue, is that similarly, like, what a huge energetic operating system that we have as males is this sexual desire and energy and like movement in that direction. And like, it's both dangled in front of our faces and used as a club to beat us constantly. And I think one of the ways that a lot of this shame gets internalized is, I always think about, if you go on any porn site and
Hmm.
look at the number of views on even the most random video, it's in the hundreds of thousands, the millions. Like, more time is being diverted to that content than just about any of the other content on the internet. And the same people, people like you and me and the guy down the street and the person in the car on the road, we're the ones consuming that content and then showing up in culture, just pretending that we're like, you know, respectable, like showing up with our partners and friends, etc. And I think, I'm not saying that there is shame in that necessarily. That's a whole other topic. But I think that's like a pretty potent example of how people are holding this like double standard and presenting in one moment, who they want to be, and then relapsing, or however you want to frame it, kicking the cat, or, watching some graphic act of,
Hmm.
domination over women or whatever, in the next moment, and then trying to reconcile those and feeling shitty the whole way along. So anyway, yeah, ping pong back at you.
Man, there's so much in that, and I guess without getting super in detail, because I mean, you could talk about that whole topic for hours. I mean, it is such a massive control topic that is just really honestly not talked about because it's uncomfortable for people. It's and but I mean, it's this mix of um, I, man, watching this like this machine, and the older I get, and the more like, and I experience processing and learning, healthy ways to process this stuff myself. That massive amount of desire that flows through the vast majority of men is a normal, healthy thing. In fact, it's a wonderful, beautiful thing if it's channeled, either not just towards beautiful experiences with a partner or something like that, but also to create things in the world. Like that's the same. That's Shakti. That's the same. Like energetic. You do a bunch of spiritual work. You clean your system as you move through. Your sex drive usually increases, right? Because it's more of that energy moving through your system. And so that in and of itself being a wonderful thing, but then that being so, compounding that shame early on, while, and you really called that out, the porn aspect, I feel like I think I saw a stat years ago that was like, I think it was like 30 or 40% of the entire web's traffic was porn. And it's crazy, crazy. And like that's the outlet, that's the sexual education for men. And not that inherently, I mean, I would say like not that inherently like video content or sexual content is inherently bad by itself, but the flavor of porn that exists in our site, in our culture, that is like 99.9% of it, is like the worst possible training for men. Like the amount of time that it takes to like uncondition yourself out of these programs that get that, and not only, and I feel like it gets ingrained so deeply because it's you're tapping in on basically, it's not even just a sexual thing. Like it's tied to stress release, feeling okay, acceptance, access to the feminine on demand, like all these really really deep, messy, weird things. And like way deeper than just sexual desire. And then that getting compounded with feelings of orgasm that are going to ingrain those dopamine pathways really really deep in your mind, and it becomes this addiction to basically almost like as a salve of whatever is going on in your life, that there's some kind of relief for it in this practice or anything like that. And I feel like, and as that's kind of further shamed and pushed underground, and then people are pushed to more extreme content and more unrealistic stuff that nobody actually wants to do in real life, all kinds of stuff like that. And anyway, I feel like there's such a, you see so much of that in, well, I mean, like the Epstein files, right? And the stuff with Diddy, you see like the consequences of that, and these desires in people get more and more and more extreme because they're expressing darker and darker parts of their psyche that are not being dealt with. And then, and I saw something on Instagram a while back that was a couple really really good posts by some men that I follow about this whole thing, but then saying, okay, here's the far extreme of this, but the whole reason why, or a big part of the reason why there's no prosecution, there's not more outrage, there's not more accountability, is because the vast majority of men are to some degree participating in this, right? Are to some degree, your money's going toward this, your attention's going toward this, whatever it is. And anyway, it's just this really really big under the surface collective wound that I feel like, I mean, I don't know any, it's there's like a real reckoning that I feel like is happening around this whole process. And I feel like it's one of the biggest things for like men doing their own internal work to not just look at the ways that the vast majority of us got conditioned, which is really uncomfortable to look at, really uncomfortable to look at. And then the very even more uncomfortable work of deconditioning yourself and getting yourself out of those processes, and sort of ingraining in new neural pathways to basically find healthy, wonderful, beautiful ways to channel that desire. Um, anyway, and also to meet needs internally in other ways, needs that are not sexual, needs that are getting met through sexual practices, how to meet those in other ways as well. I feel like that's honestly probably one of like the deepest, most challenging, difficult areas for any man specifically going through their internal work. I mean, that's yeah, God, you could spend a decade on that.
I know. Uh, um, yeah, and you brought up the Epstein files, and I, in the last couple of weeks, I listened to Nobody's Girl, the memoir of an Epstein survivor, like kind of one of the main ones who was an early kind of whistleblower and went after those people. But it's her whole memoir, and it was really affecting. And it was weird too, because some part of me, I don't even quite remember why I decided to listen to it, other than it had come up in conversation a few times, and I was just curious. And as I got into it, like there's a part of me that was like, well, I mean, there's lots of parts, and that's kind of what makes it so complicated. Like there's the human and like the father, and like seeing this young girl who, even before Epstein, was a victim of what this culture has produced. I mean, she was abused by caretakers, her father, her father's friend. Like there was so much abuse that was already there culturally, that by the time she got to Epstein, like you said, it's just like this phenomenon, like coming to a head, or like
Mhm.
in the context of that much money and power that Jeffrey Epstein had, then all of these things got to be like kind of shamelessly flaunted, but they were all happening everywhere anyway. And the
Yeah,
girls, a lot of the girls that got abused, they were selected because they had already been abused. They were like,
exactly.
they're
Yeah.
just on this conveyor belt to this terrible place. And there was a part of me that was like kind of like scintillated, like, oh my gosh, what's gonna happen? These 15-year-old girls, and this like, like they're like, I can't deny that there was like these energies that get like elevated in me thinking about it. But then the story is like so dismal that all of that like gets deflated, and you really just have to sit with this picture of like, oh my gosh, this is who we are.
Hmm.
And I was thinking about it, and I was actually like doing a little bit of research, like what was the average age of like a princess that was married off for a political reason, in the 1700s or whatever, like like women have been kind of traded in this way at those ages, going back through the ages. So to look at something like the Epstein phenomenon is not to put blame in this one individual or a group of elite individuals. It's to see how, the backside of this tapestry of the culture we already exist in, how deep it goes. And I think taking ownership, not that we started it, not that I mean, I'll just speak for myself, not that I started it, not that I'm, materially contributing to it, but that it is, like you said, like that was my training, as
It's
a
all of
young,
our problem now. Yeah.
yeah.
It's all of our problem now. Yeah.
And yeah, you started to say at the end, and I agree, like this is a much bigger topic, and this might be a good one to, bring in different guests and voices and, uh, pull those threads further, because I think it's like this core blockage of letting the future that I want to see arrive is that, I don't know, I'm like picturing like a comic or something where all of these, um, yeah, just like put together, kind, gentle, affecting this like positive masculinity people are trying to come to the table to solve these things. But under the table, we're all in this orgy of unchecked, uh, energies that just have never been grounded in a way that we feel good about it, let alone, our partners and, the feminine presence around us is, yeah.
So to tie this back to one of the things you were saying earlier with like the whole kick in the cat thing, right? And really like taking an honest look at, oh God, like kind of like the I'm part of the problem thing of why did I do, why is there this part of me? And obviously it's, like a little thing. I'm sure your cat was fine. I'm sure it's, I'm sure it sounds much worse than it actually was. But even being willing to look at that honestly of, oh, there's like there's violence in me. I do that all the time of like, oh God, there's a lot of it, and there's all these other dark elements in me. And I think you've read the Way of the Superior Man also, like David Deida does like a really good job of tying in like these parts exist in everybody, specifically in men. You have to see them, you have to own them, you have to integrate them, and find ways to basically express them in ways that are not harmful to other people, and ways that can actually do good for the world. But if you just try to deny them and just go, oh, I'm not like that, that's not like me, I'm not like that, condemn, shame, whatever it is, it's you just further hide those parts of the shadow, and then you further give them power to hurt people, basically either people around you consciously or unconsciously. And it's like such a massively humbling process to look at. We're talking about all these different ways that we as men have been conditioned to be oppressive, controlling, dominating to women, all of these different kinds of things like that. To really look at those things, and rather than like, oh, I'm not like that, then like, okay, how am I like that? Let me look at my life. How am I like? How am I expressing some element of that? Because I'll bet you, if I talk to the woman that I've lived with for loved for 10 years, I'll bet you she could probably make a list of like here, 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 you know what I mean? And that is such like a humbling process that I feel like gets hidden, because even the men that would have the bravery to do that on their own, that it gets hidden under this layer of shame that makes it so much more difficult, that even to look at it is so painful that the psyche will literally hide it and will literally not let you look at it, no matter how hard, you know what I mean? And you always have to come up with all these different ways to work around it until you can finally get that part to unlock to where you can actually finally look at it. It's incredible the lengths that the psyche will go to say, oh, I'm not bad, I'm not like that, I'm not whatever it is. It's absolutely, anyway, it's a fascinating process both to watch in other
Yeah.
people and then to watch in myself too, doing my own work. Sometimes the layers that it takes to be able to say, oh fuck, this is the same energy that does all this damage over here. I am expressing and animating in 1% of that or whatever, but it's real, and it's expressing over in this way. um anyway, it's a really, really
Yeah.
interesting process.
Man, and what I'm thinking about is that I've had such powerful growth come from being able to admit to these things or to
Hmm.
face these things, um, with witnesses, in the
Yep.
men's groups, and then even like, there's sometimes in like therapy and places that I've been able to just like say like, I did this thing, or,
Hmm.
I feel this way. And because like you alluded to, like we will hide it, we will deny it, it will be subconscious, it'll be like move, it's the fucking bucket under the house,
Yeah.
like that's my whole analogy here, that's just leaking, and it's making you unwell, and the rats are feeding on it, because it's like unchecked, and it seems like the thing that is called for in small and large ways, is the bringing of that bucket into the light. And
Yeah.
at first it's messy and it's dirty, and you can get really sick because you're really close to the thing,
Hmm.
and you got to like put on protective layers, and you have to be in a safe space. But it really feels like until we're able to excavate some of those layers and just share them and be like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, we're in community here. Like
Hmm.
it's not an individual thing. I mean, it's a tapestry of individuals, but it's like a collective thing. We all share a part of this. It's like the sunlight is the best disinfectant, but in that process, like, it is so painfully uncomfortable. And the thing about kicking the cat this morning, the moment that sticks in my mind, other than the feeling of his like rear haunches on my foot, which I still feel, just that like imprint psychically, physically, was how he looked at me. Like, he turned back, and he gave me this look of just like, you know, um, kind of shocked, hurt, on an emotional level, like this animal. And my immediate reaction, like in that moment, was just to yell at him further to scare him away so I didn't have to see that look, like,
Hmm.
go on, get out of here. And I think that's
Wow.
also
Yeah.
what's happening right now
Yeah.
culturally, is like, this stuff is being brought out, like we're witnessing it, but it's so painful. It's like, yeah, like, like that further just repelling of it. Um, but I don't know. I have despite the outside appearances, again, we've talked about Trump. I believe he's not so much like an individual as he is an expression of a
Absolutely.
collective
Yeah.
consciousness,
Yep.
like with such dense crystallization of these patterns that, like, holy
Hmm.
shit, we really have to see it. He is the bucket. There's a bit of that in all of us, and he is like putting it in our face.
Hmm.
But then, like, what happens next? Is it I think about the men that are like ICE agents and stuff that are like, okay, yes, we are these terrible things, but what are you going to do about it? Like, go
Yeah.
on, like, like we're going to push it even further to like make the victims run and hide. But what I was just starting to say is, like, I do have a lot of optimism that on levels large and small, these vibrations are shifting. They're going to have to shift, because what got us here is not going to get us there. And yeah, maybe in future episodes of things, we could be talking about some of those, not just the whats and the whys, but the hows. Um, yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, and I think we've talked about this kind of thing a little bit. One of the things that I almost appreciate about the just absurd things that are happening around, a lot of the Trump admin and stuff like that, is that some of this stuff, yes, unprecedented, but a lot of this stuff, including around a lot of the political dealings and stuff like that, the wars, all kinds of stuff like that, that's been going on for a very long time, very long time. It's just been masked by men in suits that were really smooth about it and made you feel okay about this horrible thing that was being done. And so, in a way, there's almost like a part of me that appreciates like the in your face type thing of just like, yeah, we're going to do this and we don't care. Whatever, that's already been going on. You know what I mean? Like that was not different under Clinton, under Bush, Obama had the best pot, wasn't different there either, in terms of the drone strikes, in terms of just the civilians getting killed, in terms of the detention centers for migrants, for including people who've lived here for years, all this stuff. And so anyway, I do feel like there's at least there's more of that reckoning, and to me there's this huge grieving process associated with that. And I think, we're probably still going through that in a certain sense, but there's at least the initial grieving process of looking at it, um, for like honestly looking at it for the first time, which at least that part, I know we've both, gone through extensively, right? But I feel like there's just so many more that I feel like that's just happening on a broader and broader scale, because it's the same thing like being unconscious of something in your own psyche. If you don't want to acknowledge something horrible that's happening in the world because you can't do anything about it, or you feel guilty about it, you feel responsible for it, you don't want it to be happening, whatever it is. But if you won't acknowledge it, and your psyche is so offended by this thing, so scared of this thing that it hides it from you, again, it's you literally, I mean, I've had plenty of conversations with people. We get into political topics, gets a little dicey, but I've had conversations where basically I've helped the other person to see what the reality of how the painful reality of what's actually going on, and they go through their grieving process around it and their pain and everything like that, and they come out the other side and okay, I can at least accept that I can realize this is happening now. What can I do about it? And then I've had a conversation with other people that just they shut down even harder. You know what I mean? Of just no,
Um,
no, 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 and they won't look at it. Doesn't matter how much evidence, how much everything you could hold up a picture and hold it right in their face, and they will not. The mind doubles down on it. And I feel like we saw a lot of that stuff during and after COVID too, but that's a whole nother conversation. But anyway, it really is. I feel like there's this kind of fracture happening in society of to what degree are you willing to look at just how fucked up the world is and what is actually going on here, and to what degree are you either denying of that, just overwhelmed by that, or just wanting to blame somebody else for that. You know what I mean? Or just wanting to, well, it's their fault. Well, it's their, I'm not part of the problem because of that. You know what I mean? And where I do think it's the reality that we are all part of the problem. Some maybe more than others, but like we we may not have made the mess, but we are certainly responsible for it. So yeah, it'll be an interesting next couple of years, man, to see
yeah.
where things go
And
societally.
kind of like tying it all back together. One of the things that is interesting to me is that, with my grandfather passing away, I had some conversations with him in the last few years, and they were really interesting. I mean, he was very different from me politically and just, his view of the world. And it's my experience right now. I don't know if others feel similarly. It might just be the age that I'm at, kind of the stage of life, but I'm seeing that generation dying.
Hmm.
And every time that happens, it is it's allowing the current generations to fill that space. And there has been a lot that has been awakened to or understood. And it's almost like we can't do that healing until those generations die and pass the torch. And maybe it's not 1 year off. Maybe it's more like 5 to 10, 20, who knows? But I am hopeful that as the disinfectant and the sunlight comes into these cracks that have been so tightly knit around this culture that we talked about this in the past, kind of the Ray Dalio, the rise and
Hmm.
fallen of empires. Like we're on that disintegration path, and it feels organic. It feels like something that is a cyclical
Yep.
kind of thing, like when everything
Hmm.
is going gangbusters and the culture is dominating the world, like who's going to stop and like face the dirty laundry,
Yeah.
like that's all in the rearview mirror. We got places to get, but we're going to be the generation, I think, kind of sifting through the yeah, just the reckoning of what it took to get here.
Hmm.
And I felt, sad that my grandfather died. Obviously, like he was an amazing man, and I never get to, talk to him again. Like everything that I had in that relationship, at least on this plane, like it's now concluded, and there's like a finality to that feels, full of loss. And there's this sort of like stepping into a new space that I couldn't enter before because there was this other presence there, but now I get to step in, my son gets to step forward, like we're all kind of given this opportunity. And yeah, I guess there's a lot of optimism in me still that this is just what it looks like, and we didn't start the fire. But we're gonna be the ones here like holding the hoses and the salve, like you said, to kind of nurse the wounds. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Well said, my friend. I like that. And like I said, my heart's with you around your
Mm.
grandfather. So yeah, please. I know I'm traveling a little bit, but yeah, let me know if
Yeah, no,
feel free to
I'm
send me voice notes or keep me
yeah.
posted on how you're doing.
Yeah, I'm looking at the time. We're right about an hour. I'm just wondering again, like, we came in shot from the hip. This is where we got. I think we covered some good ground. Just energetically, like knowing that we're not going to be talking for a little while you travel through Africa. Anything that we want to do to kind of, arrive at the end of a chord progression? It still kind of feels like we're right in the middle of it.
Hmm.
One more note to hit. What you got?
Well, I guess I've got two things in the back of my mind. One is just kind of I just kind of keep thinking about that kind of pain of disillusionment, right? Of just almost anything in the world that you look at right now is worse than you want it to be. And why is that painful? Obviously, because of whatever's happening, there may be pain there associated. But to me, I feel like the biggest pain is the fact that it's not what you wanted it to be or not what you thought it was, especially if it's a belief that you've had for many years. I've had so many of my, lifelong beliefs just shattered in the last 5 years or 10 years. And that I feel like is such it's kind of like a death. It's kind of like part of your psyche that was organized around that it literally is kind of ripped apart. It kind of dies, and it's a really really painful, uncomfortable process. And I feel like the more people that can accept that that's okay, that it's uncomfortable, that it's painful, but it's the most painful if you fight it, and that the truth matters more than our illusions, than our the things that we want to be true, whatever is actually true, that is more important, at least to me. That matters more than whatever I want to be true. And I think more normalization around that, I think that would be valuable and helpful. And then the other thing, and this is kind of tied to a couple things earlier on, I think some of the stuff we were talking about at the beginning, but I thought about something we were just talking about, just kind of these giant swings that the mind will take, and that's actually very relevant with the a lot of the whole illusions dying and things like that, and just that kind of pain of things not being the way that you thought they were, and the stories that the mind will then extrapolate from that of, oh, I feel this awful thing, or if this is true, then therefore this, and all these kind of things. Like it's so easy to just get caught on a runaway train. And a mentor of mine, when he's leading meditation stuff, a lot of times what he will do is kind of bring your attention to the sensations in your body first, and then the raw sensations, and then the fact that there's this layer on top of it, which is basically whether you think the sensation is good or bad or comfortable or uncomfortable or what it means or whatever it is, and realize that you're not the one that's doing that. Your mind is doing that. And you can't stop your mind from doing that either. It's going to do that based on whatever its conditioning is. And to basically just don't try to stop it, but just notice that that's what it's doing. And that's what's happening. It's happening automatically. Same way that if, you just listen to the words that I'm saying, you don't have to try to understand them. Your mind takes care of that automatically. It's just, oh, you couldn't stop it if you tried. And basically, I think bringing more, and I don't know why that was just really something that I wanted to add for today, but bringing more awareness to that mechanism, because I feel like there's so much damage that mechanism does when it's unconscious, and so much freedom that comes from that mechanism when it's made conscious, because then you can start tweaking the way that the
Uh,
mind is perceiving certain things. But anyway, yeah, curious any thoughts or reflections on your side there.
yeah, I think that's I was following along, and we started off like in our first episode talking about like tools being more valuable in some cases than ideas or
Yep.
philosophies or things. And it made me think of Kayla was trained in 6 seconds. And the premise there is there's like a 6 second gap between, or like the possibility for a 6 second gap between the stimulus and the reaction.
Yeah.
And
I'm familiar with that.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, one of these tools is like when you are triggered, like this morning when the cat was attacking Hadley, rather than chasing him down and kicking him, that 6 seconds to, and in this framework, it's more like, list six things, like six sports teams, or like just give your mind the ability to have that 6 seconds, however you fill it. And in that amount of time, it's enough for those like big surges to kind of dissipate.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, because I think, following on from what you said, sort of my parting words, I guess, at the end of the episode is that there's this funny dichotomy that I believe both of these are true. I believe that everything that we just talked about and the leaking buckets in all of us, the hidden bucket that's under the house, attracting rats and coming out subconsciously, like, is true. And we are whole and perfect and complete as we are in this moment.
Hmm.
There's no problem to fix. Like, those two somehow are true. And I think it's the ability to look at the bucket and know it's there and see how it affects us, and to, whether it's taking mushrooms and laying on the couch, or it's, sitting with a friend at a bar and being like, hey, I did this really shitty thing and I just want to tell someone about it. Oh, I've done something like that too, like airing out the laundry. Those are the tools or the pathways to get to a point of self-acceptance, which is the hardest part, that then we can start showing up as the people who we are, without those additional layers that are subconscious and triggering and like trying to keep us safe, trying to protect. It dawned on me that when I was a kid, I got hit. Like, I got hit for things. And now as a parent, I have this like impulse in me that when something
Hmm.
is like pushing me past the point of what I think is tolerable, like, fortunately, I haven't hit my kids. Um, Animals kind of taught me this lesson first. Uh, but holy shit, like that's there. And I don't want that. And it's not that I am bad or broken
Hmm.
or wrong. It's just like seeing uh, that tapestry, the backside of that tapestry is what allows. All of this started with us talking about like moving those emotions and what can happen when they do move, and allowing them to get to their fullest and overflow and be messy and ugly, crying, wailing, whatever that takes. Because then that's where on the backside of that wave, things can actually shift and they're not just repressed. So that's a long way of saying, like, if you're
Hmm.
listening and any of this has resonated with you, you're not alone and you're not broken. We're all part of this really complicated, messy, multi-generational thing. And we have an opportunity to be with it, to understand it, to kind of, I wanted to say like midwife it, like birth it into the next thing that it's going to be, like as a masculine energy. And
Yeah,
yeah.
because it really is that, like, not, speaking about, any person in particular, like, not your fault, but definitely your responsibility, right? Like,
Mm.
not your fault, whatever happened to you, whatever conditioning, if waking up today in this, body of how the hell did I get here? Well, all these things happened to you, and your psyche and, nervous system and everything like that tried to survive the best way that it could. Okay. Zero point in shaming any of that, blaming any of that, or judging any of it. You didn't make all the events around you happen, but it completely 100% being your responsibility now of what to do with it. And I feel like that I've been really trying to lean into that more in my own life too. And it's really difficult sometimes because, again, it goes back to like the unconsciousness thing. Like, if I take responsibility and say, okay, this is fully my responsibility, what happens here? Well, that's kind of scary. Like, that's a lot of responsibility you're taking. Like, it's a lot easier to be a victim to, oh, I'm this way because of these things happen to me, and because these things keep happening, there's nothing I can do. It's a way more comfortable for the psyche in a lot of ways to be a victim getting kicked around by life in a weird way than to stand up and say, oh, I see these dark parts in me. I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to find some way. I'm going to keep turning over rocks until I find a way that works to integrate and express those energies in a healthy way. We've talked about like Michael Singer before. I think in one of his talks, I heard him say something to the extent of like, real spirituality starts when you say no. When you stand up and you say, no, I will not have my life determined by these energies that keep happening to me. No. And you start to exert that conscious will inside to do something different than what the conditioning wants to do. So anyway, it's
Yeah,
quite a journey, man.
I love it. And this will be maybe my closing line. I have a little shelf of books here. This is again one
Love
of
that
the.
book.
I mean, this taps on so much of what we just talked about.
Yep.
And there's
Love
a
that book.
phrase in here, existential kink. If you're listening and not viewing, there's a book I'm holding, Existential Kink by Carolyn Elliott. Um, she uses this line a number of times in here, and it's something to the effect of, until the subconscious is made conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate.
I think Carl Jung said something similar.
I think it's
I love
probably
that line.
probably a
I
quote
love
from
that
you.
line.
Yeah.
I love that line. It's a good ending note.
Cool. Well, we'll land the plane here as you get ready to get on another one or a series of them, taking you to the
Series
other
of them.
side of the planet. But yeah, you'll have to check in and let me know how it's going.
I definitely will, man. All right. Hearts with
Cool.
you. Love you,
Yeah,
man.
man. All right.
All
Till
right.
next time.
Take care,
Cheers.
man.